Hi everyone, welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. Today we're up to chapter 36. Now, chapters 36 and 37 are both quite short breather chapters, so I'm going to combine them both today and read them together. Alright, let's start with chapter 36. With the ebullient cheers of the crowd echoing in their ears, the wolves headed off the grass and back to their room. Talyn followed, smiling at their excited chattering. "Did you see the look on those falcons' faces when we won?" Zamril crowed. "This will show them," Corrin said, his face flushed with excitement. "We aren't so inferior after all." Talyn opened her mouth, wanting to warn them. The winged folk weren't going to take this well. But the looks on their faces stopped her. They looked so proud and excited, she couldn't ruin that. There would be enough time for warnings later. Instead, she asked, "Something changed in the second half. You started playing better, well enough to win. What was it?" "I thought an accomplished warrior like yourself would have recognized our strategy, Captain," Theac drawled. "I remember how we mentioned an alternative plan to deal with your attacker," Corrin interrupted. "Yes," she frowned, not sure what that had to do with the game. "Since the aim of shooting you was most likely to prevent you taking part in the game to ensure we'd lose," Zamril said, "we decided the best way to get revenge was to win the game." "So we sat down and worked out a strategy to win," Theac said gruffly. "We played terribly in the first half on purpose," Halun said, "for two reasons: to gauge the skill of Prince Azralan's team and to give them false confidence. Then in the second half we came out fighting," Theac said, "and gave them a big shock in doing so. The momentum carried us through the first two goals, which was the plan." "We had to fight for the last two goals," Corrin said, "but this time we didn't hold back, using everything you taught us." "Our thief here has a mind for this sort of thing. Most of the strategy was his, and Theac helped polish it." Halun gave both men a firm nod. "I see," she nodded, trying to give herself time to come up with an appropriate response. If she hadn't been utterly floored before, now she was downright shocked. Now that they'd explained it to her, she could see exactly how the game had flowed to a perfect plan. All those little things in the first half she'd put down to chance. It had been the wolves, cleverly baiting the falcons into thinking they were useless, while not allowing them to score too highly that they couldn't come back. If she was honest, she hadn't seen this in them. "Maybe not, but your instincts were spot on," Sari whispered. Before she could say anything, Corrin spoke up. "Captain, you told me once that you look out for those under your command. It runs both ways, you said. We're a team. We look after each other, and that means we've got your back too. Always." "You're our captain," Theac added, scowling in perfect imitation of Theac. "Nobody touches you without consequences. There was no way we were going to lose today. She trailed off, then took a deep breath. "Thank you." An awkward silence descended, none of them comfortable with the sudden level of sentiment hanging in the air between them. It was Zamril who broke it, clearing his throat loudly. "I don't know about the rest of you, but I think that win requires celebration. I know this great little place in the dock quarter where the ale is cheap and delicious. Anyone care to join me?" "You don't mind if I come?" Theac said hesitantly, his wings ruffling. "Should anyone speak against it, I'll introduce their heads to a steel pole," Halun spoke, the smoothness of his cultured accent at odds with the blunt words. Corrin nodded in violent agreement, and Zamril jerked a thumb in the big man's direction. "What he said. Come on, let's go." They crowded for the door, excitement still spilling out of them in waves, then turned to look at Talyn expectantly when she didn't immediately follow. She opened her mouth. It was on the tip of her tongue to say yes, to follow them out the door. But then it hit her. She wanted to. She wanted the high spirits and camaraderie of a night out drinking after winning a particularly difficult battle, and she wanted to do it with her wolves. She'd started to care about them. Panic closed over her chest so tightly she almost gasped. She cleared her throat, swallowed. "You should all go. I need to stay." Their faces fell, and the sight of it ripped at her, but she couldn't do this again. She had to keep her distance. "Have fun," she managed, doing her best not to let them see how broken she was. "And no drill in the morning. You've all earned a day off. I'll see you in 2 days." Corrin opened his mouth, clearly intending to protest, but Halun grabbed him firmly by the shoulder and shoved him at the door. Theac's laughter trickled out as the youth almost went headfirst into the door, and Theac barked in admonition. Zamril gave her a small nod and followed them all out. The door swung shut behind them, and she took a deep, steadying breath. It was better this way. Safer. That's the end of chapter 36, and we'll go straight into chapter 37. He sat in his seat at the stadium for a long time after the game was over. Others were doing the same. Many were families, husbands and wives and children excitedly recapping what they'd just seen and not wanting to leave and let the magic die yet. It had been a late afternoon game and night was falling quickly, the sky black and full of stars above. They'd won, and it had fundamentally changed his world. Somehow, some way, the wolves had beaten Prince Azulan's falcons and for the first time ever had won a victory for the human folk. He'd been unable to believe his eyes when he'd seen the way the wolves fought back in the second half. They hadn't been weaker or less skilled or in any way inferior to their winged opponents. The wolves had met the falcons head-to-head and defeated them on equal terms. Fierce hope had bubbled up in him as he watched them fight with the heart of true warriors. And all because of Captain Dynan. Any lingering doubts he had about her intentions in Mithrena had faded. She had turned a rabble of human criminals into warriors and, albeit unintentionally, used them to prove the worth of humans to a winged population that stubbornly refused to see it. She might refuse to admit it, might deny it even to herself, but she was just like him. He wasn't alone. It was heady, the fragile hope that maybe there was someone he could trust, that maybe for the first time in his achingly lonely life there might be someone else who wanted the same things he did. He crushed that hope before it could take root. It would hurt beyond measure if he was wrong. Still, he needed to talk to her. Soon. And that's the end of chapter 37. Let's keep going to chapter 38 because that's relatively quick as well and we don't want to end this too soon, do we? Alright. Talyn had barely finished bathing, made slower and more difficult with her bandaged shoulder, when a firm knock came at her door. Night had fallen, her room lit only by a handful of lamps. Outside the Mithranan evening was warm and heady with the scent of flowers. She opened the door to find Theac there, a large flagon in one hand and small sack in the other. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Apple juice," he said before she could say anything. "Mind if I come in for a moment?" She sighed. "Theac, you should be out celebrating with the wolves. You deserve it." "Yeah, well, me being around so much ale probably isn't the best idea," he shrugged. "Apple juice is safer. It's also a lot more expensive, so best let me come in so it don't go to waste, Captain." She wanted to tell him no, to retreat back into her room and be alone with her painful memories and despairing thoughts. Instead, she found herself letting him in and waving him over to the sofa by the unlit fire. Her lounge windows were open, letting in the warm air and light from the torches in the walkway outside. "Not much privacy up here in the Citadel, is there?" he grumbled. "Windows and open-aired spaces everywhere. Plus, flying people who could drop in on you at any time," she smiled wryly, dropping onto the couch. Theac said nothing for a moment, busying himself emptying the sack and pouring them both a glass of juice. Along with 2 small cups and plates, the sack had half a pie of some kind of sweet-smelling pastries. "The pie is Arana's," he barely fought a smile. She thought Corrin might be hungry after the game. "The pastries are cherry, my favourite. I get them at a small bakery in the market quarter whenever they can get their hands on the fruit. I've been going there since I was a boy." It wasn't until she began eating that she realised how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten since a small breakfast. They ploughed through the food in strangely comfortable silence. Once finished, Theac leaned forward to refill both glasses before settling himself back on the couch. "So, who did you lose?" he asked gruffly. "Theac, I've seen it before, of course. Happened to me once or twice," he said. He was looking at his cup instead of her, giving her space. "I don't want to talk about this." Despite his effort at gentleness, her body had turned rigid, and she stared straight ahead, not wanting him to see what was on her face. He was silent for a long moment, then, "Did you ever wonder about the blue we chose for the symbol of the wolf on our uniforms? The colour of our captain's eyes? You said it was tradition in your king's shield, and we wanted to honour that." "Theac, I can't." She was mortified when her eyes flooded with tears. Had they really done that for her? She didn't deserve that kind of loyalty. "You said we're a team, and we help each other out. Now, I understand you might not want the lads to know your personal business, but I'm your second. More, I've been a patrolman many more years than you've been a warrior." He paused. "I'll leave now if you want me to, nothing further to be said. Or I can stay a bit, and you can tell me who you lost." "My partner." The words were barely audible. She wasn't sure she'd ever said them aloud, not since Sari's death. He said nothing, giving her space to tell as much or as little as she liked. And once she'd gotten those first 2 words out, she found the rest spilling out of her. "Callan and partners are close. We train together, fight together, think together. It's like having an extension of your own body. Losing her was..." She shook her head. There were no words for it. "And you blame yourself." Her head whipped towards him, and his mouth creased in a bitter smile. "I'm all too familiar with that look of guilt and self-hatred, Captain. It was my fault. Sari and I, We were good. They called us the best, and it was true. There wasn't a mission we couldn't complete, a battle we couldn't win. It made us cocky. It made me cocky. One day I made a decision, went against protocol because I thought we could handle it, and she died. Misery choked her last few words. Maybe that's true and maybe it's not. Either way, it's now something you have to live with every day. He cleared his throat. But it is okay to live, Captain. She said nothing. The words were kind, but even now she couldn't find it in herself to accept them. I've been thinking on this a bit, he started again. How Talyn reacted when he tried to heal your knee the other night. What he said. Now, these Callanan of yours obviously have some kind of wingfolk magic. A wry look crossed his face. I imagine Talyn has filled your ears with his thoughts on that. She huffed out a laugh. He has. It set me to wondering. He cleared his throat. You're grieving, Captain, and rightfully so. But what you just described about how Callanan partnerships work, could it be that your magic also connects in some way? It would explain why Talyn sensed such a wound in yours and why your partner's death has hit you so hard. Maybe. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering as the conversation headed back into painful territory. What does it matter? I imagine if I'm right, the lad might be able to help you heal your magical wound. It might make coping with your grief easier. She shook her head. That feels too much like letting go. I can't let go of her, Theac. He cleared his throat, hesitated, then said gruffly, You need to let go of the guilt, Captain. She said nothing, staring ahead into the unlit fireplace. The first time I lost a lad after an order I'd given, he was barely 20 and I'd only been a watch officer for a few weeks. It took me months before I could go out on patrol again, he said. They almost kicked me out then. Would have if I hadn't been fortunate enough to have a sympathetic patrol captain. Why? She managed the single word. The idea of giving another order, of going out again, it filled me with panic, her second said simply. I was terrified of making another mistake. Her eyes filled with tears. She swallowed. What did you do? This time it took Theac a moment to reply. When she summoned enough courage to look at him, he was looking her with an expression full of regret. I started drinking. Not too much at first, just enough to take the edge off. But as the years passed and the mistakes and losses piled up, it just got worse. 2 years ago, my brother died falling out of a tree while on an Insertia work crew. I went completely off the rails after that, was kicked out of the patrol within 3 months, soaked in my grief and guilt until the day you walked into the pardonable cells. He cleared his throat again. You're stronger than I was, Captain. That's kind of you to say. She didn't tell him she'd actively sabotaged her King Shield posting, that she might freeze at a critical moment if Kuhlman were ever attacked in her presence, that the sound of an arrow firing sent her into a panic. I'm sorry about your brother. And I'm sorry about your partner, Captain. After a moment he rose, clearing up the plates and cups. I'll make sure the lads are aware that you're not going out with them tonight wasn't anything to do with them. And I'll help you keep your distance, if that's what you need. Thank you, she said gratefully. He nodded. I'm your second. So, I'll see you the day after tomorrow for drill? You will. Night, Captain. And he was gone, shutting the door quietly behind him. Sari roused. You've got a second, Tal. She did. He was a grizzled, bad-tempered, too old, stubborn alcoholic, but he was hers, and she wouldn't have it any different for the world. That knowledge was terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to live again. She grabbed hold of that flicker of hope and sat curled on the couch, sipping Theac's apple juice and willing that hope into life. Okay, let's leave it there at the end of chapter 38 for today. 3 brief but very heartwarming chapters, I think, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute in the author commentary. As always, here's your point to jump out if you'd like to avoid spoilers. There often are sometimes pretty big spoilers in the commentary, so definitely steer clear if you'd like to avoid those or if you haven't read this series all the way through before. If you are jumping out here, I hope you enjoyed these chapters and I really look forward to seeing you for the next ones. Please tune in for those. Otherwise, let's step aside and have a little chat about these chapters. What a lovely set of 3 little chapters there. We start off with the Wolves celebrating after the game with Talyn back in the little ready room where they were preparing before the game, and they outline their plan to her. Essentially, they've been brewing this between themselves. Since the attack on her, they figured that since the motivation for that attack was likely to take her out of the game to ensure that the Wolves wouldn't win, they would prove the attacker wrong by winning the game anyway. And then Zamril and Theac together with the other Wolves polished up a plan to come out in the first half of the game and essentially play much worse than they were capable of to give the Falcons a false sense of assurance and also get the sense of how good or otherwise the Falcons were before, as we all saw, obviously, coming out in the second half of the game and winning it. Pretty clever plan. Zamrel has a brain that Talyn has been saying right from the beginning, whether he has weapon skills or not, whether he's been a thief his entire life or not, he has skills and intelligence that are of value to the wing. And this is another way in which that has come out, and in which he's starting to realize that he can contribute, that he's starting to grow in confidence because of Talyn. And because for him, I think really that Night of the Floods, as distrusting as he'd been of her up until then, she really proved with action that she's been meaning what she's saying this whole time. And that was the first time that it clicked for Zamrel, that he finally began to trust Talyn. And in trusting her, he can then believe what she's been saying to him about anything. And that means his confidence in himself and his skill too. He's starting to pay more attention to that. And that has, obviously, with the assistant, result in this fantastic plan to win the alleya game. They all head off to celebrate in Dock City. And in that moment, Talyn realizes how deeply she's come to care about the wolves. And that obviously terrifies her. She's terrified of another loss like Sari, and quite understandably doesn't feel like she could deal with that ever again. And so rapidly kind of pulls back and declines the invitation and goes back to her room alone, where Theac, one of my absolute favourite characters I've ever written. He's such a gruff, old, grumpy marshmallow. I love him to death. He shows up, he knows something's going on with her, and he knows because he's been through it, right? He's much older than her. He's been a warrior in the city patrol in a place like Mithrena for decades. He's suffered loss. He's suffered the loss of men under his command. He's suffered the loss of his brother. So he recognizes what Talyn's feeling as he's gotten to know her over the time that she's been in Mithrena. And he comes to try and talk to her about it. And he gets pretty far. She admits to him what's happened. She said the words out loud for the first time since Sari's death. And he gets just little slivers of insight there that maybe she doesn't take on board instantly, but definitely burrow in there inside her and start to take life. Particularly his advice around not necessarily letting go of Sari, but letting go of the guilt and allowing herself or giving herself permission to live again. And those thoughts sit with her as he leaves. Just a really nice moment there. Him coming to the fore as her true second, someone she can rely on to take care of things when she can't. And it goes back to that decision she made that morning after she fished him out of the drunk tank. That decision to let him stay as proving itself in spades, even though at the time it probably wasn't the best decision in the world. But as Sari pointed out, Talyn has a real second, and she knows she can rely on him now, which also gives her strength. Which is pretty cool to see. And then finally in the middle chapter there, we have the Shadowhawk sitting in the alleya Stadium hours after the game is finished. He's utterly changed by what has happened. He's been working towards this for years with no real sight of it actually happening in the work that he does. He does the best he can, but he knows it's not going to get him to where he wants to be, where he feels like he needs to be. And then Talyn Dynan has come from the Twin Thrones, trained this group of humans, and they've just beat a Falcons team on even standings in a game of alleya in front of half the population of Mithrena, and it just absolutely changed his entire life. This is what he's wanted, and it also makes him feel like that maybe he's not alone, that maybe there's someone else out here like him that can help him. And it is a dangerous hope because Talyn is Dumnorix. She's from the Twin Thrones. She has no loyalty to Mithrena. She has no interest necessarily in Mithrena. She's there for a purpose that he doesn't know. She's there for a purpose to hunt him as well. So it's a dangerous hope that he's feeling, but you can't blame the poor man. He's been trying so hard for years, and then so much progress made in such a short amount of time that he sees the hope that maybe he can win, maybe it can work, maybe he can get somewhere. And that's like Talyn's feeling that hope about being able to potentially live again and find a life again. The Shadowhawk is finding that hope that maybe there can be something different in Mithrena. So yeah, very quiet, very short chapters, but also quite powerful. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any comments or questions, please drop them in the comments below. I'd love to chat. Otherwise, I really look forward to seeing you in chapter 39 soon. I hope you have a great day. Bye.